Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined once again by Laura Bradburn. We're going to be talking about Celtic 1, Wolves 1. Wolves did get the equaliser in the second half. We'll be talking about that as well. But in terms of a workout, Laura, that has probably been the sternest test that we've had. And I think that Brendan would have learned quite a bit about quite a few of the players that started that game.
Mm-hmm. I think it was a really useful exercise. I think what's clear from what we saw in the second half was that we sacrificed a little bit in terms of first team players and first choice players for experimenting a little bit, and I think our performance suffered a little bit because of that. But if you can't do it in a pre-season friendly, when can you do it? That's the whole point of the process. So I think he'll have learned a lot about a few players, and I think he'll have learned a lot more about what he needs going into the new season. The only thing that concerns you as far as that goes is trying to make sure that anything he has identified today, we've got time to rectify.
Yeah, 7 days to the first competitive game of the season at Celtic Park. It's Flag Day, it's Ross County. For anyone who's tuning in for the post-match, having not watched the pre-match or half-time bulletins, we'll start off by talking about Kyogo, Laura, because he has, over the last 2 seasons, been the talismanic striker who scored 50 goals for Celtic. Last season was tremendous. I don't know if it's going to be his vintage campaign, because he's a player who I think he just continues to impress. And today, against pretty decent opposition, I mean, where did Wolves come in the league last season? 13th, 14th in the EPL. Decent, strong opposition, and he scored an absolute cracker. And then he had a brilliant chance where he's dinked it over the keeper and it's just clipped the bar. I thought he was brilliant today, and it bodes well for the season ahead.
It does. I mean, regardless of what importance you place on friendlies, I think strikers are a certain position where it's clear that no matter what game they're playing, you want them to be on form and you want them to be firing in all cylinders. And Kyogo looks to have picked up where he left off as far as that's concerned. Still concerned that if he were to get another injury, or if the shoulder injury that's been discussed were to flare up again, or surgery was deemed necessary at some point during the season, that we might be left a little bit wanting up top. But as long as he's fit and he's able, he's as good as anything that anybody in the country is going to be able to put up top.
Yeah, I know that Jim Orr isn't a fan of pre-season friendlies. He made it clear yesterday. Can't be bothered with them. Meanwhile, Acsom will cover every kick of the ball. And Jim has a point to a degree, because if you were to go back to the first goal scorer under Brendan Rodgers in his first time at Celtic, Laura, during pre-season, it was Nadir Chifche. So that showed you all you need to know, because he did not play a part in Brendan Rodgers' tenure at Celtic Park. And then when you look at Ange Postecoglou coming in, who scored the first goal under Ange? Albion Ayeti did in the pre-season. So I get what Jim means. But yeah, good workout for Celtic today. I think, when we made the substitutions, the flow of the game changed a wee bit. That's understandable, but it's good to get these players on the park and to get, minutes in their legs. And I want to talk about some of those players as well. But before I do that, the man who laid on Kyogo is the guy that I've been saying it's time to step out of Jota's shadows. I'd resigned myself probably in the final few months of last season to Abada leaving the club. I don't know why. I know he'd kind of made it known that he had ambitions to go elsewhere. There had been some talk, probably, it was his agent putting out there, Laura, that clubs were interested. We've heard, Sporting Lisbon are interested. Fenerbahce might be looking at him. I think Rodgers can get an absolutely brilliant season out of Abada this season, going by today's performance and also what we've seen this pre-season. Brendan Rodgers, for me, is the ideal manager at this stage of Abada's career. He should stay for at least one more campaign.
Yeah, I think it's going to do Abada's game no harm to get a little bit of input from a different manager and somebody as high calibre as Brendan Rodgers. We all saw what Brendan did for players like Callum McGregor in his first term in charge, and he's definitely got the ability to get the most out of players who have the ability but don't always show it on a consistent basis, and I think Abada fits perfectly into that category. Abada at full flight has provided some of the best memories I've had over the last 2 years. That late goal against Dundee United being the standout one, obviously. But if he can produce stuff like that on a more consistent basis, then he's going to be a real thorn in the side of anybody that we come up against. I think domestically, again, he has provided and delivered a lot more consistently than he has in Europe. There's been numerous European games where when he has featured, he's been a bit of a passenger, but I think that's as much to do with the difference in the way we have to play against stronger opposition as it is to do with his actual own performance. Sometimes he just doesn't see the ball because it's not getting to those areas of the pitch, and it's not necessarily his direct fault that that's happening. But I really can't wait to see what Brendan brings out of him this season in terms of just making him much more of a threat going forward and much more of a nuisance for defenders to deal with, because it was clear, especially in the first part of the first half today, that he was one of the biggest threats for us.
There was the game, the 6-4 game, Laura, where I felt that Abada was a danger every time he got the ball. He was the kind of out ball for us down the right hand side. He was making things happen. And then today there was obviously the Leon for the goal, which I thought was superb. But there was a moment again in the second half where he switched over to the left wing. The ball looked as though it was perhaps going to go out of play, and he pulled it down, Jota-esque. And then I'm asking myself, what's he going to do with this? Because he's now got time to think. He had two Wolves defenders in front of him, and he nutmegged one of them. And I just thought, there was an element of flair, but a bit of confidence in Abada's play there that, I keep going back to it. He was kind of playing second fiddle to Jota because Jota had been, playing so well since he signed. And it's now all about you, Liel Abada. Go out there and be the match winner. Be the guy that can show us the full repertoire of skills that you've got. And I think, and I hope that is what's going to happen this season. Let's get the thoughts of our commenters and viewers in on the action here. Stephen Sloan, you were quick off the mark in the first broadcast, and you've done it again. Great workout today. Lots of positives. The only negative, to be honest, is Hart. He is clearly not the answer as our number one. We got a lot of comments like that, and we will be talking about it. I think the biggest talking point about Hart was that penalty that we were penalised for. And I've got to say, there is a comment here from William O'Toole. The last part of this comment, Docherty needs to take a look at himself. Yes, it was a clear dive for me, Laura. Clear dive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kind of embarrassing, to be honest, to be... I mean, I would like to think players wouldn't resort to that kind of stuff at the best of times, but to be doing it in a pre-season friendly where the result really doesn't matter is pretty poor. It took a couple of different replays and a couple of different angles just to get for certain, because you just didn't know where that bottom left arm of Joe Hart's had gone. But once you saw it from that reverse angle, you could see it was clearly a dive. And I think by his reaction as well, by the Wolves player's reaction, he didn't seem to be arguing too much against Joe Hart when he was remonstrating with him. So I think he knew exactly what he'd done. And it is disappointing that, bar that, we would have come away with a victory. But the other way of looking at it is we've made a Premier League side resort to that kind of tactic to be on par with us. And so we've got to take the positive out of that if we can.
Yeah, and that left arm that you're talking about pulled off a cracking save at the end, 92 minutes into the game. Looked as though Wolves were, I would say, undeservingly going to win the game, and Joe Hart pulled off a cracking save. It is a discussion point Stephen brings up there about Joe Hart. We've been talking about goalkeepers. You look at the bench, Laura, I always think about that kind of the secondary issue. You talk about the impact of Kyogo. What happens if he gets injured? Well, he was injured in his first and second seasons at Celtic for a spell. So, yeah, what happens if he gets injured? Are we happy with the backups? And I think the same with Joe Hart. There was a moment in Angie's first season against Dundee United, you'll remember, where it looked as though he was injured. I think it was a one each game. And, you just looked at the bench and thought, let's hope he's not injured, because you were not confident that we had the backup going through the big games in the season. I'm a wee bit like that, but I'm of the view that if you're going to go out and buy a goalkeeper, don't buy someone who is ready-made as a backup. Now, is that why we brought Siegrist into the club? We know that his first season wasn't ideal for him on a personal level. He plays 2 games in the League Cup, Laura. But, was he really going to be pushing Joe Hart for the gloves? I'm not sure. So I think if we were to sign a goalkeeper, I wouldn't be looking for someone just as a squad filler. I'd be thinking, right, let's sign someone who really will challenge Joe Hart this season. So I think it's a position that we will strengthen. Do we do it whilst we've still got 3 goalies at the club? Is that a bit top heavy for you? Would you need to move on Bain or Siegrist first?
It is top heavy for me. The choice of who you move on is a difficult one, because I would imagine, I don't know the figures exactly, but I would imagine it goes Hart, Siegrist, Bain in terms of wages. And so there's a bit of you that wonders if we are going to bring in another keeper because we don't think the current keeper is up to scratch. Do you get rid of them in preference of salary rather than who you think is going to be involved more regularly? Because what's become clear is, obviously you can never predict these things, but Hart played the majority of games last season. Do you just somehow find a way to offload him and replace him with somebody who you think is an appropriate alternative? Or do you use the opportunity to get rid of Siegrist, who doesn't look like he's going to get a shot with the team, and replace him with somebody, and Hart becomes second choice, but then you've got a second choice keeper who's more expensive in terms of weekly wages? So it's a difficult one, but ultimately that's up to the club to decide that. I just know from watching the last few games this pre-season that Joe Hart is not going to withstand, I don't think, the demands of a season of the number of games that he's played over the last couple of years. And I think it's clear that we need somebody else in between the sticks. Who that is, I've no idea. I actually wondered before he made the move that he did if Owulayemi would have maybe made an appearance or two this season and maybe started making his way breaking into the team, because we've heard so many good things about him, but that doesn't seem to be an option either. So I think that's got to be the priority for me. I would say a left back and a goalkeeper are my 2 main priorities going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, we'll talk about left back as well. Laura, the situation with Owulayemi was in the first season under Ange Postecoglou, he did sit on the bench for 2 games, and Bodo Glimt was the European tie that he was involved in. So you're looking at that thinking, all right, he might be the 4th choice, but as soon as a goalkeeper moves on, he works his way up that pecking order. This pre-season, we've offloaded Barkas and Connor Hazard. They're out the building, non-contributing players. I'm all for it. Move them on. And it leaves us with the 3. Now, I guess we could run before. I just feel that it's too many. And either or of Siegrist or Bain for me could be offloaded, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference, because combined they made 3 appearances last season. And you'll remember Bain's one at Easter Road was hardly a memorable one. So I think that, either or could move out. And if you're going to bring someone in, make sure that they're going to be pushing for a jersey, pushing for the gloves. And, Hart goes into his final year of his contract. And if he's in and out of the side, if it's for the betterment of the Celtic side, it's good enough for me. Listen, I'm not having a go at him. I didn't see much today that made me concerned. All right, he never saved a penalty, but he doesn't save penalties, does he? He made a really good save. The left-back position's a wee bit more concerning presently for me now. Again, not an opportunity to start having a dig at Greg Taylor. I just feel that, there's been a couple of occasions in the pre-season where you're looking to Taylor, previously Starfelt, who wasn't involved today, and Hart, to be the leaders, to be the ones that, you pin your hopes on, and everybody else who is maybe playing a rare appearance, making a rare appearance, or playing out of position in the case of Iwata, would be looking at them. I didn't see it from Taylor today. I thought the best defender on show was Liam Scales.
Yeah, I think Taylor probably suffered a little bit from what we all know he can suffer from, which is up the calibre of the opposition even slightly, and he will start to struggle. He's more than competent, and in fact, he's probably the best left back in the league domestically. But there is a big jump between that and some of the opposition he'll be expected to face in Europe. And that's where he's really found wanting. The concern with that being that I think we're all in agreement that Brendan Rodgers has come back to this club because he's been offered the chance to progress in Europe. There's no other reason he comes back, because he's achieved everything that you can achieve as a Celtic manager other than that. Mm-hmm. And so if the main priority for the manager is to progress in Europe, you can't then have a left back who is obviously found wanting at that level. The the question and the difficulty then is, can we afford somebody who's the amount of upgrade that we would need in that position? Because this might sound ridiculous to say, but behind forward players, I would say wing backs and full backs are probably some of the most expensive players that you can find, just because of the fashion by which tactics and systems go these days. There's a lot of reliance on full backs and wing backs, and they're seen as very valuable. So trying to get a good one for your money is a difficult thing to do. And I think he will more than hold his own domestically, as I've said, but we really need to make that upgrade for Europe, and the time is running out as far as that concerned.
You know, when you look at what he's done in a Celtic jersey, because I think he was written off by a lot of people, Ange Postecoglou was a manager that showed a great deal of belief in him, and it was repaid. Taylor performed really well under Ange Postecoglou. There's no doubt in my mind about it. There was one moment in that game there that we've just played against Wolves where, you know, the commentary team said that Taylor took one for the team. No, I disagree with that. I think taking one for the team, an example of that was Callum McGregor against Motherwell with 2 minutes to go in the game where we're 2-1 up and Motherwell are on the attack and he gets sent off so that we win the 3 points. That's taking one for the team. Greg Taylor was left wanting. He was absolutely rinsed down the left-hand side. And because of that, he embarrassingly pulled the player back, to be honest with you. It was almost like a body check because he was out-muscled. He didn't have the pace. And he does what Greg Taylor does in a scenario like that. He looks at all the defenders to look at who's to blame. No, it was him. It was his error. He didn't take one for the team. He took one to try and spare his own blushes. And I think that in a European game where the margins are going to be so fine and so tight, Laura, you just need everybody to be, that wee bit more physical, that wee bit more alert. There was a couple of times as well, because I know that people will come back and say, but look at his productivity in terms of assists. There was a great move down the left-hand side which broke down because Taylor didn't have that conviction when the ball came to him. He had to whip it over and he didn't. He took a touch, he looked up, by which time the chance was gone. So if we're going to be looking at all the good stuff that happened today, we also need to look at some of the things that we're a wee bit concerned about, Laura. It's not about being overly negative. We've got 7 days to go before we play competitively for the first time since Brendan came back to the club. And I just want it to be right. And at the back, that's where I feel there are still some concerns. The front six, I'm much less worried about. I look at the midfield. The midfield at Stack today is, for me, our strongest midfield. I wouldn't tinker with that at the moment until there's a loss of form or an injury. And I think up top is exactly the same. So the front six, for me, that's our strongest six. And it's down to everybody on the bench or in the squad or newcomers to break into that. I'm pretty confident with it. Yeah, Hatate seemed a bit slack today. I think there's a thing about Hatate, and it's not new, that he gets the ball in his own third of the park, the defensive third of the park, Laura, and he plays as if he's in the middle or even up top. He doesn't care about the risk of the pass. That's the type of player that Rio Hatate is. If you lose that ball in the middle of the park, it's not as dangerous. If you do it, and he'd done it a few times today, I noticed, he was quite slack in his passing. By the way, I still think he's going to have a breakout season.
Yeah, I think he deserves a little bit of criticism for his performance today. Again, though, perhaps that's his decision making being affected by the fact that he knows it's not a be all and end all game. You can maybe compliment him for saying he's maybe trying to do something different or something unexpected, but I think on the face of it, he lost possession a few too many times today, and that's something we really can't afford him to do going into this season. I don't think it'll be a feature of his game that we'll have to worry about when the chips are down. I think he will sort that out, and I think it will be a something that we won't need to be concerned about when the games are back on. But it is a feature of his game that I've seen from time to time, not as regularly as today, but just occasionally previously. But listen, Hatate's, we talked about Greg Taylor not being at the level that's required in Europe. Hatate absolutely is, and in some of those games against Real Madrid last season, he looked as if he could have strolled into their team, to be honest. So when the circumstances and the occasion is right, Hatate's as good a footballer as we have. Just wasn't a good day at the office for him today.
What I liked about last season is both Hatate and McGregor spoke about wanting to play Real Madrid. And it wasn't because they probably felt we could beat them. They just wanted to test themselves at that level, Laura, to see how wide is the gap. Am I a good enough player? What do I need to do to get to this level? And Hatate and McGregor have both spoken about it. I think this season's a wee bit different. I think when I think it's the 31st of August, the actual draw where we find out who we're in a group with, we'll be looking at that. For me, I'll be looking at it as a possible group we can get out of. Rather than let's look at the glitziest ties and play Real Madrid because we've never played them competitively. So this season I'll be viewing it completely differently. What's your take? Do you just like 6 big games, or do you think to yourself, no, I want 8 games. I want to get out of the groups?
Listen, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with the Champions League as far as Celtic's concerned, because you're in a hiding to nothing, really. If you do manage to get out of the group stages, really the most you can expect to get is another 2, maybe another 4 games, but you're not going to get any further than that whatsoever. When I watched West Ham win the Conference League last season, a lot of people call that a tin pot trophy and whatever. Ultimately, they won a European trophy, and I don't really care whether it's the Europa League or the Conference League. I prefer to be in a competition that I feel we have a real chance of winning. Having said all that, you won't find anybody more excited than me when the Champions League draw is made. If we come out with a Dortmund and a Real Madrid or somebody like that really, gets the hairs on the back of your neck standing up in terms of where you end up going to play and who you've got coming to play you at Celtic Park. So I enjoy the glamour of the Champions League, and I enjoy the opportunity to test ourselves against the best. But if I was being completely honest with myself, I think I would say I would forego that for the chance to have a deeper run in the Europa League or the Conference League, because, for my generation of Celtic supporters, there is no more magical memory than Seville. The only thing that would have made that better was if we had won it. But I mean, nobody's sitting saying, I wish it had been a Champions League final. We loved every second of that. And if we could guarantee that we would repeat or even better that in the next couple of seasons, you would bite the hand off for it.
Yeah, 20 years ago as well, Laura. 20 years since our last European final appearance, and that was our third appearance, of course, 1967 and 70 being the other 2. I mean, this season would be our last chance, you would hope, to play in the other tournaments, because you want to win the league 100% every single season. You want to win the league, but what that's going to mean in the future is that you're in the Champions League and that's it. You don't drop down to there's not that tiering system where you drop down. So this season probably would be your last opportunity at the moment until it's restructured again, I guess. But yeah, I've never looked at the Conference League in such disparaging terms, because I think back to, I grew up with the European Cup, the Cup Winners' Cup and the UEFA Cup. And whatever tournament you were in, any kind of progress would have been phenomenal. I mean, we spoke last night, Roy Aitken and I, about some of the opportunities. He always wanted to do well in Europe, because when he's broken into the Celtic side, and he won the double under Jock Stein in 76, 77. It's only 10 years after we've won the European Cup, Laura, And at that point, you're still looking at what can Jock do to try and build a European side. Of course, we get to the quarterfinals of the Cup Winners' Cup the following season under Sean Fallon, as it happened, and the previous season. And then we get to the European Cup quarterfinals under Billy McNeil in 1980. But between 1980 and Martin O'Neill coming to the club, we're nothing in Europe. And he was talking about some of the opportunities, like the Rapid Vienna fiasco, where they've knocked us out after a third game had to be played. And opportunities, little glimmers of hope that was a season that we had an opportunity, because Rapid Vienna knocked us out in circumstances that were not ideal. Controversial is an understatement. But they got to the final and played Everton. They actually got through to the final. So I think that when you look at European football and where we are in the food chain, it's all about trying to get out that group and then building on that season on season. And then there could be that season, Laura, where, in terms of the stars aligning, we're talking about breakout seasons. Next season, what if Hatate, Abada and O'Reilly step up? and then they, combined and are supplemented by 2 or 3 top-class signings, and then you've got the backbone of Kyogo, McGregor and Carter Vickers. Then you start seeing an opportunity there that, wait a minute, this is a team that's... And Colin Watt and I spoke about it before. If you were to look at all the players who were still active in the game, who had played with Celtic in the previous 10 seasons, and it all happened at the same time, wow, then you've got an opportunity. Then you've got a team that would have Forster and Wanyama and Van Dijk and Tierney and all these incredible footballers all playing together. And it's not fantasy as such, it's about timing. And if you incrementally improve season on season, it's difficult when you're losing a top player like Jota. Of course it is, because he's so difficult to replace. But that's what I mean with Abada, time to step up, son. And this season, become that Champions League player, because we've not seen it from him yet.
Yeah, I would really like to see him step up, become more consistent domestically, but especially in Europe, and provide some of those magical moments for us. Because as much as I'm saying, I'd prefer us to be in a competition that we could win, and obviously trophies are the be-all and end-all at the end of the day, we've had some magical moments in Champions League games. The game against Pep Guardiola's Man City at Celtic Park was a fantastic game. The 2 games that we beat Man United back in Gordon Strachan's time were fantastic as well. The Juventus 4-3 game at Celtic Park, I could list them off. It's like there's plenty of magical moments, but they're just trying to balance up those moments with the bigger thing, and players like Abada are going to come in and hopefully make that difference for us. That was actually a nice segue to what I wanted to ask you. I've seen on Twitter this thing, right, where they tweet, who do you think of when you see this shirt? So I thought I'll put this shirt on today and I'll say, who do you think of when you see this shirt?
There's only one player. And it's Nakamura, for me.
Absolutely.
For two goals, the goal against Kilmarnock, where he takes it off and swinging it around his head where we won the league, and one of his free kicks. I've got to qualify that because he obviously scored 2 free kicks against Man United in the Champions League. One of his free kicks against Man U. So when I look at that jersey, first player on my mind is Nakamura. But I like to double up on these things by saying the cult kind of player that I remember was Tommy Gravison, because I remember him wearing it in Europe as well.
I thought you were going to say Yuri Arisic, but...
Well, until he started slagging off Scottish football last week, I might have done. But Tommy Gravison, I remember him running about like a headless chicken in that jersey a few times. Paddy Lavery, another dodgy penalty. Yeah, it was funny actually. Sometimes Jerry McCulloch comes up with a wee one-liner. He's done a few times this pre-season, I've noticed. And he's done a Cantwell, was what he called it, when the player dived, basically. We've also got Personal Jesus. Been a poor pre-season, but hopefully Brendan Rodgers can now strengthen. I'm not too sure. I mean, I think, as I've said before, Portugal was about fitness. Japan, initially about Brandon, but it was all about assessment for me. And the next couple of games, today and Tuesday night, is about us actually starting to see something resembling what will be a start 11. Yeah, he's thrown in Welsh and he's thrown in Scales today. I think it was a worthwhile experience to do that, Laura, because I thought Scales over the piece played very, very well. I thought he came out of that game maybe giving Brendan something to think about.
Well, listen, it's a new manager is of no more benefit than to somebody like Liam Scales, somebody who can come in and reinvent himself. Hopefully, Brendan Rodgers isn't coming in presumably with any preconceived ideas about what he thinks about Liam Scales. Unlike me, of course, who knows what I've seen of him over the past 2 years and then assumes, therefore, that he's not really got a future at the club. So Brendan Rodgers is maybe coming at it with fresh eyes. He can take a lot more from a performance like today and say, no, I can get something out of this player. I personally am not sure that still remains the case, but that's what the new manager's there for. That's why the players who have been a little bit out in the cold feel like they've got a brand new opportunity there, and fair play to him. If he continues with performances like today's one, he's obviously going to make the most of it, and it's all to the better of Celtic.
I look at it like in a tier system, Laura. Who do I reckon is the backup goalie? Well, at the moment, I think it's Seagrist, followed by Bain. Who's the backup centre half? Well, based on performances, Scales is above Kobayashi for me, from what he's shown. I think whatever happens with William Scales at Celtic, he will eventually be become a full cap for Ireland. I think he's shown enough that he will go to a club. And it could be Aberdeen, although I don't think they're going to be able to afford the fee. Although they're in for a few players that are commanding decent enough fees. I don't think they're going to be able to pay the fee for Scales. And then there's a decision to be made on whether he stays or goes out on loan to another club. A couple of things before we go. I don't want to finish off without mentioning the performances of Yang and Kwon. It was the first sightings we had of both players who I thought they got involved. Laura, they showed enough in their first appearances that, you know, they could be there or thereabouts. I said before that the first 4 signings this pre-season are very much prospects, potential players, squad bolstering players. But from that, over a season, you're going to see these guys, and I thought they performed pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you can take from a 10-minute appearance in a pre-season friendly, I thought there was enough there to suggest why they've been brought in and what they'll bring to the team. So, yeah, I was quite encouraged with what I saw, and given that before the match we were talking about a potential lack of signings up until this point, I don't really have any complaints with 2 new guys coming in and you know, potentially proven to be viable options, if not off the bench, then hopefully in the starting lineup come later in the season.
I just want to point out as well, at half-time, O'Reilly was getting a bit of stick in the comments, Laura. 58 minutes on the clock. We actually said at half-time, yeah, you know, you'll be saying that until he plays a through ball. And he did just that for Kyogo in 58 minutes. So I thought O'Reilly was fine today. And I don't want to finish without saying that McPherson's performance for half an hour as well. I thought he played out his skin, Laura.
Yeah, I think he's another one who's potentially looking at the opportunity of, and this is what you like about his attitude. He's not thinking, oh, I'm a young player, they're just sticking me on for a few minutes here and there in the pre-season and then I'll get a loan move or something like that. He means business, and he's going to do his utmost to become a regular feature in the side. Still got a lot of work to do to prove that, but the least you can ask of him is to have the attitude that he's shown, and he certainly looks like he's got that in spades.
Yep, it does. And thank you to Paul McLean. I think it was a decent enough result and performance. We would have got the win if it wasn't for a dodgy penalty. And hopefully we don't talk about that very often this season, Laura. Thanks everybody for getting involved. 900 to 1,000 strong on the post-match. If you like what we do, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a comment on the live stream, subscribe to the channel. I will be at Celtic Park Monday morning for a Wander Round Paradise. That will be up on the channel by 5 or 6 o'clock. I'm going to stick to 6 actually, 6 o'clock Monday night for a Wander Round Paradise, and that will be a look back on the week that we've just enjoyed and a look ahead towards next week, where we've got 2 games of football to look forward to. The James Forrest testimonial on Tuesday night, and then of course Ross County at Celtic Park for Flag Day. As I said before, we are supporting a couple of charities at the moment. You can still download The Glory and the Dream, which is the single we released in December, and we're supporting young Jamie Tierney, the 4-year-old who needs our support. And the full story is on the link underneath this video. You can go in there, and if you're able to donate long as we possibly can. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you once again, Laura Bradburn, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.